The 1913 Land Act happened when South Africa already existed, which is most of the dispossession happened before the idea of South Africa could come together. When the Boers made a peace treaty, they decided to chop up the land. So the British has already taken what they could from their colonies, which was Natal and the Cape. And the Afrikaners had already taken from the Free State and the then Transvaal. Once they came together, they decided that in order to own the rest of what they hadn't already taken by fire and blood and gore, that they needed to make a law. And this is not a new thing in the colonies. Wherever Europeans went, they ruled first by blood, and then they would get, then they'll set law to maintain the order. Before 1913, we have Bambatha who fights the tax. So after they've fought you, whatever you have left, they come and say, oh, you need to pay a hut tax, a cattle tax, young man tax. So you must pay tax to the Queen of England, who's not even your queen, somebody that you've never heard of. So by cutting off at 1913, then we're saying that everything else, Steerman, whose head was put on a spike on Robben Island. We know Robben Island for one person.
Mandela.
Yeah, you said it.
Masello, thank you very much for joining us on Something Nice with Dinano. Dala, we've been saying we're going to do this. We finally got the time. Kyalebuha me. Is that how I say it?
Yes. Okay. You're coming along, eh?
I'm trying. What I usually do is an introduction of my guest. How do I intro you? We've been in the industry for a long time, more than 20 years.
Something like that.
Yet you're still young. Well, I know you've just turned 40 like me. But you still look relatively young. But it looks like you've done a lot. Pure Munati show. Was it called One? Was it Studio Mix? Was it live then?
One.
Yes, that program. Kabonang. So you were the original Bonang.
That's only a chronological fact.
Yes. There's so many other things that you've done. But what really caught my attention was, I don't know if it's a play or a performance or a depiction of history that you did during the Land or Section 25 public hearings in South Africa. Was it 2018, 2019?
2018.
Somewhere in Western area. I saw you there and I thought, this face looks familiar. Couldn't put the name to it. But I approached you and asked you what you were doing. What were you doing?
We were doing a historical reenactment, a presentation on all the kings, not all, but some of the kings who were beheaded prior to 1913, because the government likes using this cut-off of 1913. And 1913, they were just stitching up what was left, basically. So the story we were depicting was to make people aware that it was about detailing dispossession. That's what the project was about. But speaking about all the kings who were beheaded, Luka Jantjie, Bambatha, Makgoba, no Hintsa.
As a person who is a journalist, studied journalism, I didn't even know of that history. And that's what caught my attention. That's what intrigued me. That's why I thought, let me get this woman's number. Need to get in touch with her because I was already working on that project of land dispossession and the issues around the land issue in South Africa. For someone who doesn't know the context, someone who's not South African, there's a talk and supposedly a change coming in our legislation where the restoration of black people's or the natives' land should be given back to them. It's been dragging, still has not happened. I have my doubts that it will ever happen. I don't know how you feel about it, but what's key to this whole debate Masello will differ, and a lot of other land activists will also differ, is an act that came in 1913. It's on the wall here. I'll take a shot of it. The 1913 Native Lands Act, or Natives Land Act. Tell us about that act, and tell us why you think the issue of redistribution or restoration of land to its original people shouldn't start there. It should start, I think you said 1500s, when the Portuguese first came here.
Yeah. The 1913 Land Act happened when South Africa already existed, which is most of the dispossession happened before the idea of South Africa could come together. When the Boers made a peace treaty, they decided to chop up the land. So the British has already taken what they could from their colonies, which was Natal and the Cape, and the Afrikaners had already taken from the Free State and the then Transvaal.
Just relax, man.
So once they came together, they decided that in order to own the rest of what they hadn't already taken by fire and blood and gore, that they needed to make a law. And this is not a new thing in the colonies. Wherever Europeans went, they ruled first by blood, and then they would get, then they'll set law to maintain the order. So it wasn't a new thing. They practiced it all over the world, but when they got here, they really defined these laws of dispossession. If you can look at that, that's the 1886 Farms Occupation Act. This comes after the beheading of uMakgoba. And what it says is that any Afrikaner, if they find a farm, by the time the census comes, bapalisa ngawe, then you are the owner by virtue of a census, right? Before 1913, we have uBambatha who fights the tax. So after they've fought you, whatever you have left, they come and say, oh, you need to pay a hut tax, a cattle tax, young man tax. So you must pay tax to the Queen of England, who's not even your queen, somebody that you've never heard of. So by cutting off at 1913, then we're saying that everything else, Steerman, whose head was put on a spike on Robben Island. We know Robben Island for one person.
Mandela.
Yeah, you said it. But they used to put spikes of people so that when you come in, when Makanda went in there, so that you can see what happens when people try to escape. So once you've put people's heads on spikes, you've chopped off their arms, you've cut off their heads in front of their children. That's why Sibesaba. It's a trauma that comes from seeing your father beheaded in front of you. Then you know ukuthi umlungu akudlalwa ngaye. Because people are like, why re-tshaba batho bana really majority? And you can't figure it out. But if someone chopped off your father's head in front of them, I don't know how you would regard that person. I think you would. Mawubabona nje. You know what I mean? So the reason why I don't agree with the 1913 cutoff is because that was just putting polish on, that was the last act. That was the last, the cementing of our dispossession. We'd been dispossessed thoroughly over and over. I mean, the Jantjie family, he was beheaded in the 1890s. His own uncle, he was beheaded by the English. His uncle, Khasiboni, who's the father of Khalishiwe, was killed by the Boers. So this family has this recurring nightmare, and we don't know where the heads are. Well, that's the mission now, to go and find these things.
So that's the intro to our talk. But now I want us to go a bit back, and then we'll go to that first encounter Yam Nawe and those three kings. You'll tell us a bit more about Jantjie, Bambatha, and Hintsa, right? Yeah. But now I just want to, because we've been talking for a while now, and there came a point in your life where you got awakened, enlightened, a revelation came. Tell us about that when that happened and what it sparked within you.
I normally tell people about this one big movement, but in the past few years I've realized that the more I go back into my memory that there were earlier moments. But growing up I was born in 1981, so I grew up right just before the state of emergency, around that time.
State of emergency is 1985, 86,
yes. And my father was a playwright at the time, a revolutionary artist. So there were...
Sorry. I want us to give historical context and proper background, because we do have people from other countries who might not know the history of South Africa. So the state of emergency, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, was when townships were really losing it and had lost their patience and just wanted this whole apartheid thing to
ungovernable,
end. Ne? So it was at the height of violence as township, and so-called mpimpis, which was the informants, were getting necklaced. Yes. And I remember this because part of my family is in Uitenhage, Ekarriega now, Tinaga then Kwanobuhle. And the state of emergency or the riots is Lukshini there was on a very high level. My first experience of seeing Inyala is what they call it here at Joburg. We used to call it a hip hop and I forgot the other name. But that's what was happening in South Africa then. Yes. So you were waking up during that time, right?
No, I was just there and witnessing. And I always felt like there's another eye. I'm always watching things from like a bigger lens. And people are coming to rehearse at home. People are coming to have meetings. And then a few years after that, then there was the change. And before the change, my father and friends were always talking about the new South Africa. It was a big phrase, new South Africa. But when the new South Africa happened, it was nothing that from remembering what was being discussed around me. It was more about more integration and an overtake of white hegemonious culture in the name of mixing. So then now you get taken to different schools, you have a different life. And that took up a lot of my time. You know, being a coconut is a lot of work.
So would you say it was us being assimilated into whiteness and white culture?
That was what our parents didn't bargain for. They just wanted us to have a better education so that we can have a better chance in life. What they didn't realize was that was at the expense of our cultures and our individuality and those sort of things. So there I was a very happy coconut, and then this girl who ruined my life, Baring Moema, you ruined my life. She gave me a copy of Malcolm X and I literally lost it.
What was the name of the book?
The autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley, in which it's in his voice. He's talking to Alex Haley. And that was it. I dropped out of school.
Round about what time, what grade, what standard?
Standard 9, standard 9, grade 11.
It was a green ID book gang.
Yeah, standard 9 or grade 11.
Arthritis gang.
And it really made me
standard
lose
9.
It. Yeah.
A year before matric, a year before your final year of high school.
Yeah,
okay.
Then standard 8, end of standard 8, I think, or standard 9, somewhere there. And then I dropped out of school for about a year and a half or 2 years. And then...
Why? Malcolm X, what did he say?
Hey, oh, he's like, the whole system is rigged. White people are the devil. So I was like, you, man, this is cool.
And you know, Model C school,
yes.
white school.
And I was like, what's wrong with my friends? And Claudia and them, and Tanya, they're my friends, Malcolm.
So at that moment, you didn't see anything wrong with the system?
No, I thought we were all
Why
together.
Why did you drop out then?
No. I dropped out after. I had a feeling of wanting to drop out so I could be an actress in Hollywood or something. But then there was this cultural dilemma that I didn't have the wording for. You know, we weren't in the age that we are now where we have these words. We didn't have those words when we were in high school. But it's not that we didn't feel the racial tension or the tension of the duality as an African. And you could feel it, but we didn't have the words that people have now. We didn't.
Like what type of words are you talking about?
Woke, white supremacy. They didn't come off like this.
But you've always been aware. Because I was aware of such in high
Yes,
school.
you're aware. You're even more aware. The more you're in those spaces, the more you're like, hey. But we didn't have the language that people have now. It doesn't mean that we didn't feel it, right? Okay. So then the Malcolm X thing happened. And in that transition afterwards, I started reading Gugu Tiongo, who says if you really want to repair the colonial damage, then
This
you have to go back.
decolonizing the mind now?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
you're decolonizing the mind, and you have to go back to using your native tongue. So then I went to Limpopo, to Moria, to find a school where I could re-stitch my brain, like fix the damage in that way. And I'd last done Ispedi in standard 2. And now I was redoing standard 9.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to catch up all that
Lost years.
Yeah. And then I didn't even finish matric because I got what I needed. I was like, okay, now that I can do this pretty thing, toodles.
Okay.
Came back to Joburg. Now I'm a poet. I'm writing in English and Sepedi. Joburg is big in Joburg. Poetry is big in Cape Town, in Joburg. Yeah, all that shit. But everybody's trying to be an American. I was very disappointed. There was the slam. I went to Jungle Connection, and people are like, and these are this. And I was like, how wale? Nankanili tiama American. And so mina been moshi party because everyone was this and this, and these Hillbrow streets, mothers are dying, children are, and I'd be like, So my linguistic agenda then was on from then. And this is like 2-3 years before presenting one. And on one, my whole thing was presenting a Spedi on a prime time Nguni channel. Right? But the thing was, whatever language it is, you must push it. And I'm still on, that's still one of my major themes, because that is also a form of loss and dispossession, but it can be repossessed.
And then the land thing happened around 1996. There was the Land Redistribution Act, right? So these are laws prior to our so-called freedom, right? Okay, so I think the Land Redistribution Act came in 1996. I remember this because, as I said, I was doing a piece on it, or a feature at work. But as I was doing research, something struck me, and I thought to myself, Haibo, aba bantu ba serious about redistributing land. Around about that time, a guy called Derek Hanekom happened to be, or was appointed, the Minister of Land Reform and Redistribution. And I look at the name, and I look at the background. Former Afrikaner, Boer farmer, put in charge of land reform.
Yeah.
How does this make sense? So I had these questions. But are these guys serious about this thing? Mandela, I think Mandela is the one that appointed him. All right, so he's appointed, he's set out to reform this whole thing. Fast forward to 2019. Nothing significant had happened regarding land redistribution. I see this young lady from Soshanguve doing some demonstrations, or a demonstration outside the hall in Western area. Three Beheaded Kings, Bambatha, Hintsa, no Jantjie. What's the background to those guys? What is their story? And why is that story important to the whole issue of land reform and land redistribution?
I think at the moment we are operating from an emotive basis when we say we want our land back, right? You can't point to where and how. So for me, the importance of this project is detailing the dispossession so that people can see themselves in it and be sure that iThakazelo zabo are the title deeds. That's what the mission is, to arm people with that information. And when you look at these three kings, and all kings throughout the southern and throughout the continent, they were these really hardcore killings where they chopped their heads off. And once you chop the head off, I think also symbolically, you've decimated those people, right? So Hintsa ingxaki ibe the just before the Abo Harry Smith and them trying to claim Grahamstown and pushing people back. And his role in trying to assert his people's self-determination over their own land, he gets beheaded for that. The same with Luka Jantjie, whose uncle was also killed. Kosop.
Sorry, before we go to Luka
Yeah.
Jantjie, I think you awoken something, with the whole Hintsa thing. Me having grown up in Xhosa land, in Maxhosa, because I'm still trying to find my roots. I always say there's no Dlamini who is Xhosa. I can't be Xhosa, but I speak Xhosa because
Yeah.
we grew up there. But that's a story for another day. So on the Hintsa thing, I was really interested. I read a bit about it. I think he was shot at Kai River, the Great Kai, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. Got beheaded. They took his head, took it to the Queen or something. But now, as you were saying, that whole act of beheading or our parents, our grandparents, is so traumatizing. And I just remembered something now. I think it was during the coronation of during the funeral of the previous Xhosa king, Mlibeli Gamalaki. Professor Somadoda Fikeni, he referred to something, I think, about the beheading of Hintsa. And I could sense that he was going somewhere, but I could sense that he also stopped himself because he thought, okay, maybe I'm getting a bit too radical in what I'm going to say or a bit too political. And I do not want to, this is me now, upset
rock
the
the
Queen,
boat, yeah.
rock the boat. And I'm thinking of this trauma you said. So we still have this trauma because of what these guys did.
We haven't even dealt with it. What we've done is come up with things like BEE, right? So that's to redress the economics. We haven't redressed the spirit. You are dealing with a trauma ward of people, just absolute traumatized. And most of the people don't even know why they're traumatized. It's very, very painful because you can't figure out. We're a majority, but why repalla ke batho ba? It doesn't make any sense.
It's still there, right? The head is still there.
Yes, usaloya ngayo unantsika.
Elizabeth.
La mama.
Yeah,
A lot of the
Are you
heads-
traumatized now? Why aren't you saying the name?
I don't want to acknowledge her. When you call someone's name, you acknowledge them. So I don't want you to
It's like
acknowledge.
Christians. I avoid to say the devil in my prayers.
Yeah, I don't
Don't
want
give him any
to
credit.
to give her any more stature. But the amount of trauma that we've sustained, the beheadings were only the highlight. So they'd also burn you out. Burnt earth policy, that's what Lord Kitchener was famous for.
Lord Kitchener's eyakhe, le lapha eBramford.
Yeah, so that was his chill spot after.
Leni
spending
Tanda
the-
yezo dad. Do you know the history? I've been there. I don't
Yeah,
even know the history.
I go to Kitchener's. And I just feel like, ugh. But during the day, they'll just scorch your earth, behead someone, then go chill at Kitchener's Coventry or down the road here at the Radium Beer Hall. So the amount of trauma that was inflicted, we haven't had any counseling. Never mind the counseling apartheid. Apartheid is another thing, right? But apartheid is a cementing of colonial tendencies and practices. All these laws are before apartheid. Zenze ngamangisi. Most of them.
Yeah, there's only one that came after the 1951.
Yes,
but everything
all
else is
of
before
these on this world,
1948.
The damage, apartheid only cemented the dispossession and then practiced discrimination.
Okay, let's go to
Right?
judges.
So there's a huge difference because then this then sets us up later when 94 is about fighting discrimination and not dispossession. The word dispossession falls out of the national dialogue completely until recently.
Okay, let's go to Jantjie. We've spoken about Hintsa. Jantjie, what's his story? The second king in the Three Beheaded Kings.
Jantjie is the son of Jantjie. So the Jantjie we're talking about, his father's name is Jantjie Mutibi. He is Luka Jantjie because you would be Owaka Babako,
Yes.
Owaka Babako, kanjalo,
Ngugi
kanjalo.
Watiyong, Ngugi of Watiyong.
Yes. So Luka Jantjie's grandfather was the first person to allow missionaries in to stay there, and that's where we get Reverend Moffat to then translate the Bible into Setswana and that sort of thing. But the land that they lived on, Abatlaping, is now the diamond fields. So the the battle started with the settlers started way before the diamond loss with the Afrikaners, with a collaboration between Jantjie's uncle and the Inkosi Abatwa in that area called Ukosop. So Kosop was beheaded, then Khasibone was beheaded, then a generation later, his nephew Luka Jantjie is beheaded after even going on trials to say, but you guys stole my land. You know, so this was after the Battle of Langeberg. There was a full-on battle, and he fell at Langeberg, and
you
they-
did a
they chopped
drama
off his
depiction
head.
of that, and it's available on YouTube,
of
right?
Luka Jantjie
Luka Jantjie
in a
court.
dramatized trial, yes, a reenactment of a trial. So that's a story that I've been working on the longest outside of these other ones. But the thing is that the king may be in a different place of a different nation, but the method is the same. So that is
The
how
method being
for
the
me-
beheading.
being the beheading of your alpha male, your leader, whoever is holding you. You know, when they kill Makhoba, then they come after every beheading. These laws prop up because they have to use law to maintain order after the killing and the burning and da.
And then the third one, Bambatha, he was a chief, ne?
He was a king. Also, the word chief. This only happens when you discuss people who are not white.
Okay.
So these are anthropological terms to say that someone is a chief. Yeah.
Getting educated here.
So Unkosi Bambatha Wamazondi, he was fighting the tax thing.
The tax thing.
Yeah, they were saying people must pay cattle tax. And he was like, no, inkomo zami. Why? That's ridiculous. You must pay tax to Queen Elizabeth. And he was like, yeah, that's not my king. That's not my queen. I don't recognize that person. And he refused to go down. And there was actually a battle. And after that, after his capture, the men that were left were brought here to build the houses right here where we are sitting, the slave labor.
Yeah. This was what, late 1800s, early
No,
1900s?
that's 1906. This house was built in 1907. Bambatha fell in 1906.
Okay.
So even up to 1930, so whoever was a resistor, who was not jailed, you were jailed or put on a chain gang to come build these houses. And you can look at these stones. They were carried by hands. So there were a lot of people who died here.
Up the hill.
Yes.
Okay, so which of these acts really stand out for you? Which one would you say really cemented this whole dispossession,
They're the same.
displacement?
They're all part of one. It's chipping away at someone, chipping away. Every hit matters, you know. By the time you get the final blow, 1913, all those other blows count, you know. So I don't have a choice per se. They all bother me just as much because each and every one of them also are dispossessing an entire family, an entire clan. These are just the other side,
Okay.
you know.